What's up, guys? Today's video is all about getting big traps. And you guys probably know the deal by now, but just to recap, traps display power. Doesn't matter if you're in a coat or if you're shirtless, traps are gonna be one of the first things that everyone sees. And besides making you look powerful, I consider big traps a badge of honor. In my opinion, that true look of power is hard to fake. To get that real thickness in your upper back and traps and your spinal erectors, you gotta put in some real heavy, hard work. If you want to look powerful, you got to get powerful. And before we get into it, I am going to tell you guys, there's not a single shrug on this list. While I do believe that shrugs are a valuable exercise, they've never been my main focus. In my opinion, the upper traps specifically are hit well enough indirectly when focusing on more important movements that have more overall value in your training program. These are also exercises that I think a lot of people would benefit from in more ways than just getting bigger traps. So maybe you'll take something away from this video. And with all that said, let's get into number 4 on our list, the Sandbag Highpull. Starting off at number 4, we have the Sandbag Highpull. This begins a trend you will see throughout the entirety of this list. In my opinion, developing power and building big traps go hand in hand. The Sandbag Highpull allows you to repeatedly work on developing triple extension power from awkward angles. I prefer a slightly underfilled sandbag here. Your upper back starts in a rounded forward position at the bottom, and as you explode upwards, your upper back and traps will be maximally contracted to complete the rep. What you'll notice is that as you get stronger, you'll be able to raise the bag higher. And once you pass a certain height threshold, the mid and lower traps become very involved as well. This movement also actively works thoracic extension through a full range of motion. When you're at the bottom of the movement, your upper back or your thoracic spine is fully rounded forward, just so you can get your arms around that bulky sandbag. And as you explode upwards, what you'll notice is that everything is fully extended. All of the muscles involved in thoracic extension are maximally contracted and they're getting developed. It's rare to find a movement that lets you actively work this. Actively working on thoracic extension may be very beneficial at warding off that dreaded hunchback posture. It's going to help improve your posture, which will also indirectly make your other muscles look better as well. Although the Sandbag Highpull may not make you as sore as some of the other movements on this list, rest assured your traps are working maximally. Not only will the Sandbag Highpull develop bigger muscles, it's also going to help with your posture, and it's going to make you more powerful. I think it would be a great addition to any training program, and that's why it sits here at number 4 on our list. Alright, moving on to number 3 on our list, we have the Snatch Grip Highpull with a barbell. Again, we have another power developing movement. You may have seen or heard before that Olympic lifters have massive traps. Well, a lot of that comes from developing power with a snatch grip. Again, as with the Sandbag Highpull, the Snatch Grip Highpull also works the upper back, which makes this an exercise with longevity. While you may eventually decide that your upper traps are big enough, you'll most likely never say no to a bigger upper back. You can initiate the pull from a few different positions depending on what you want to get from the movement. You can start from the floor, from the hang, or off pins or blocks depending. Personally, I like to start off pins with the bar resting just about an inch above my knee. I feel like this allows me to get into the most optimal position to generate the most power on every rep. In my experience, and something I've noticed from watching hundreds of different lifters do this movement over the years, is that there seems to be 2 main ways to do the movement. You can do it the way the trained Olympic weightlifters do, or the way that most average gym goers end up doing it. And I'm not saying that one method is necessarily better than the other. You're still going to make great progress using either style. But in the long term, there is a clear difference in the amount of force you will be able to generate when you start doing it like an Olympic weightlifter. So what I've noticed with people who are untrained in Olympic weightlifting, and what I was doing myself for a very long time, is known as an arm pull. So if you're looking at the movement from an outside perspective, it looks like this. You bend over, explode upwards, and pull the bar as high as you can. The only problem with this is that your arms are a lot weaker than your hips. So I'd be watching Olympic lifters do this, and it looked different. Rather than bending over and then pulling upwards, they'd be bending over, and then they'd get to a certain point, and it would seem like they did a hip thrust, which caused contact between the bar and their hips, and that caused the bar to rise. And that made sense to me. It makes sense that that would generate more power. And if you're an Olympic weightlifter yourself right now, you're probably saying, duh, obviously that's the way to do it. But if you don't know, you don't know. The only problem was I went to do that method and I was significantly weaker. And I'm still not 100% sure why this is, but for some reason, I've realized starting from the hang seems to lend itself to doing an arm pull. I'm not sure why, but something about already being loaded when you go to initiate that pull just lends itself to doing an arm pull if you're untrained. So the workaround that I have found, and the thing that has allowed me to get much stronger in a very short amount of time, is starting off pins. So I'll put the bar right at that exact position where the hip thrust begins. And now, starting off pins, I'm able to do that Olympic weightlifter method, make contact between the bar and the hips, and the bar just flies up. It's unlike anything else. So maybe you've seen this in yourself, or maybe you're just starting out with the movement, but I highly recommend starting off pins or off blocks. It's going to help you a lot with generating more power. The snatch grip high pull is also a movement you can get great results from without excessive weights. This is power, not strength. So just because maybe you can throw 300 pounds up a few inches doesn't mean you should. You got to pull that bar as high as you can. Personally, I noticed massive trap growth once I made it to 185 pounds for sets of 10. So you don't even necessarily need to become too strong before you start to see results from this. And one final thing I can say about the snatch grip high pull that might help you out when you're doing the movement, I know it's helped me, is that essentially it's a weighted jump. So when you're jumping, you bend down same way you would with a snatch grip high pull, and then you explode upwards. Well, you're just doing the same thing with the bar in your hand. You bend down, you're loading the joints, and then you perform triple extension of the ankles, knees, and hips. Everything becomes maximally extended. You end the movement on the balls of your feet, and then you come back down, just like a jump. Try not to actually jump in the air, but imagining it definitely helps. Oh, and before we move on to the next movement, I should mention, it might be worth it to you to get a mouth guard. I have hit myself in the chin on this one before, and it wasn't pretty. And on to number 2 on our list, we have the farmer's walk. The farmer's walk is a personal favorite of mine. I've been doing it for so many years now, and I'm never gonna get tired of it.
Hey guys, it's me from the future. I'm just giving a quick shout out to my friend Unknown Strongman. I wanted to show you guys someone who has some real massive traps for this part of the video, and he's agreed to let me use some of his footage. So if you're interested in seeing some crazy strongman feats of strength, definitely go check out his channel. It will be worth your while. And now back to the farmer's carry.
My personal favorite way to do it is with a trap bar, but if you don't have access to one of those, just do what you can because it's going to help you out. This was the first movement I did that really started to grow my traps in a major way. I remember reading an article by Dan John on the T-Nation website, and in that article he was talking about doing long distance carries, and he had something heavy in each hand. He had like a weight vest and a backpack and then also a sled behind him, and he was just trekking along, and he said it made his traps and his upper back really big. No surprise. Well, I thought that was super cool, so I wanted to do it too. I didn't have access to all of that cool equipment, but what I did have was a pair of 45-pound plates and a backpack. So what I would do in my little apartment when my roommate was gone, I didn't want him to see me doing this at the time. I wouldn't care now, but then I did. And I would set it up so I could sit on my bed, put that backpack on my back, then reach over and grab the 45-pound plates and stand up. And I would set a timer, and I would walk out of my bedroom door, down the hallway to the living room, and do circles just all around while my roommate was at work. Would have been funny if he walked in, but he never did. And what I noticed was actually some crazy trap growth. I was not expecting it to work so well, but it just really made me solid. For what it was at the time, when I was a beginner still, doing something that was loading my entire body like that just really helped me out. So what I would do is set a timer for 5 minutes, and then I'd walk around, and every time it became too unbearable to hold on to those plates, I would rest them on the ground for a second, maybe like 2 or 3 seconds, and I'd pick them up, and I'd keep walking. And at the end of that, I would write down how many times I had to set the plates down. And eventually, I got it to where I didn't have to set them down at all. And the feeling you get in your traps from carrying 45-pound plates plus the 100 or whatever pound backpack I had on for 5 minutes straight, it's unlike anything else, and I definitely grew my traps along the way. And once I hit that 5-minute mark, I decided I would kick things up a notch, so I ditched the backpack and I took my 45-pound plates and I would go for a walk around the neighborhood. I'd walk maybe a half mile away from the apartment and a half mile back. And you know, on the way there, it's not so bad. Every couple of minutes, you gotta set down and readjust, but then you realize you're a half mile away from home and you gotta make it back. You can't quit because you can't just leave your plates on the ground. What are you going to do? Call your roommate or whatever to come pick you up? You're not going to do that. You have to make it back. So on the way back, it might be every 10 to 20 steps you got to stop because your traps and your forearms are on fire. Eventually you'll make it back and come out the other side a different person. I will say I saw some good trap growth from this, but at this point I had kind of maxed out what I was going to get from the 45-pound plates. It was at this time that I decided I needed something heavier. It took me a while, but eventually I did get my hands on a trap bar. And once I was able to start loading that thing up relatively heavy, that was the first time I thought to myself, okay, you got some good traps now. You know, up until that point, they had grown, they were bigger than before, but they were still nothing special. But once I hit, I think it was 300 pounds for about 100 yards, that's when they blew up. And that was when I said, okay, this is one of my best body parts now. This works. And you had to know this was coming. There was no way we could make an entire video about building bigger traps without mentioning the weighted stretch. It is very well known and documented at this point that the weighted stretch is one of the best ways to build the upper traps. I mean, when you're doing a farmer's walk, your traps aren't doing anything. They're just being stretched under load. I mean, they're probably keeping your arms from getting ripped off. I think that's what they do. But they're not shrugging or anything like that, and they grow. This is a big part of why the farmer's walk is so effective. And finally, as with the other movements on this list, the farmer's walk is not just a trap isolation. They are so much more than that. Farmer's walks are one of the most functional exercises you can do, and they build your entire backside. They also improve your posture and your confidence in your stride. Try walking around with a couple 100 pounds in your hands for a couple months and then just walk around as a regular, ordinary person. You're going to feel confident. You're going to feel solid. You're going to feel secure in your place on earth. So the farmer's carry, it's one of the most productive exercises you could ever possibly do. Don't skip these. They're going to help you out inside and outside the gym. They're going to make you bigger, stronger, faster, more functional. It's going to improve your posture and make you more confident when you're just walking around. And hey, best of all, they're going to make you a master at picking up every single one of those grocery bags and carrying them inside. All right, guys, and here we are at the #1 spot on our list. Now it's time to talk about the Landmine Highpull. What you'll notice is that this is essentially a cheap meadows row done with a more vertical torso angle. And these are serious. They will leave you sore for a week, and I'm not kidding. Nothing has ever made me more sore than the Landmine Highpull. Getting stronger at these really took my traps and power production to the next level. And while we find ourselves on the topic of power once again, these allow you to unilaterally develop raw power, which is cool and unique. These feel like the most natural power builders of all. Something just feels right about applying the entire body's force through just one arm. The Landmine Highpull also takes the weighted stretch we were talking about before and gives it a bunch of steroids. The secret is in the catch phase. I like to do these dead stop off the ground to develop starting strength, or you might say starting power, and I also feel that this allows me to put more into each rep. But you need to catch the weight in the air before resting it on the ground every single time. The catch stretches the traps like nothing else I've ever done. And like before with the Snatch grip high pull, make sure this is a high pull, not a low pull. You'll get more out of it with less weight this way, and here's why. So consider this. A 200-pound person jumps in the air. Depending on how high they jump, the amount of weight or force that hits the ground on impact is going to be much more than 200 pounds, maybe 3 times that much. Now think of the barbell. If you put 150 pounds on that bar and power it up as high as is possible, gravity is going to cause those 150 pounds to fall faster and faster until you catch it. You are essentially catching what could amount to hundreds of pounds more than that original 150 with your traps and upper back. I first started seeing rapid growth in my traps when I made it to 135 pounds for full range of motion sets of 10. Now that's a beginner weight, and you are going to get much stronger than that pretty quick. But it was once I reached that point that I started to actually see some real growth. And before I finish off this part of the video, I think it's my moral obligation to give you a bit of a warning. This is a high-risk, high-reward movement. If you get stronger at this, you're going to see some crazy growth to your upper back and traps, but there is a risk associated. Now, I'm not trying to scare you away. I still think it's worth doing, or I wouldn't have put it on my list. But there are a few things that you should take into consideration. So to start off with, you got to start slow. Think about what the movement is. You're essentially taking a heavy weight, tossing it in the air, and then catching it with your muscles and your supportive structures. If you start too heavy, you could tear something. Now, I've never felt like I was close to tearing anything, but I do feel the inherent risk. And while your hand is pronated, which is the safest grip for your bicep tendon, you are still catching and it's kind of jerking into place. So I've always wondered about that. I've never had any scares with my bicep tendon or anything, but it's still something to think about. And finally, the last thing you should take into consideration is there's kind of a ceiling with this movement. So to hold on to the end of the bar, you got to use straps, right? What I noticed is that once I got to about 200 pounds and was able to throw it all the way up, catching that thing, it kind of puts a lot of tension on your wrist. Just the feeling of the strap catching, all of that pressure right here. Now, it hasn't been so much that I felt like I was going to break something, but it is still something to think about because eventually you will tap this out. So the Landmine Highpull, while it may possibly be a high-risk, high-reward movement, it landed a spot at number 1 on my list for a reason. It works. Nothing else has ever given me that same stretch that this movement does, and it has helped me in so many ways outside of just building bigger traps. I feel like being able to unilaterally develop power from that position is something that you don't really get anywhere else. So the Landmine Highpull, number 1 on our list, definitely worth doing. And there you have it, guys. There's my list of my top 4 favorite traps movements. And what you'll have noticed is that none of this stuff is easy. Every single movement on this list requires hard work. But if you're willing to put in the consistent time and effort over the next few months and you get stronger and more powerful with these movements, you're going to be amazed at the results. So I hope you guys liked the video, and until next time, thanks for watching.